Imagine leaving your home tomorrow and beginning a journey across an entire continent without a GPS, a paper map, a compass, or even a road to follow. Most modern people would quickly become lost. Many of us struggle to navigate unfamiliar neighborhoods without assistance from a smartphone. Yet for most of human history, humans traveled enormous distances without any of the tools we now consider essential. Ancient humans crossed deserts, mountains, forests, grasslands, and coastlines long before maps existed. They explored unfamiliar territory, discovered new resources, and gradually spread across nearly every habitable region on Earth. The scale of these journeys is difficult to imagine. Starting in Africa, human populations eventually reached Europe, Asia, Australia, and much later the Americas. Taken together, these migrations covered thousands of miles and transformed humans into the most widespread large mammal on the planet. What makes this achievement remarkable is that none of these travelers carried modern navigation equipment. There were no street signs pointing toward distant destinations. There were no satellite systems guiding movement across unfamiliar terrain. There were no printed maps showing rivers, mountains, or safe routes through the wilderness. And yet people still found their way. Even more surprisingly, they often returned successfully to places they had visited before. Ancient humans were not wandering randomly across the landscape. They possessed sophisticated ways of understanding and navigating the world around them. The secret was not a forgotten technology. The secret was a different way of seeing the environment. To our ancestors, the landscape was filled with information. Every river, hill, coastline, valley, and distinctive landmark could become part of a mental navigation system. Knowledge about routes, resources, and safe travel paths was stored inside human memory rather than on paper. This ability became one of the most important survival skills ever developed by our species. Without it, humans could never have expanded across such enormous distances. The question is not whether ancient humans could navigate without maps. The real question is how they managed to do it so successfully for tens of thousands of years. To understand the answer, we first need to understand something surprising. For ancient humans, the world itself functioned as a map. For ancient humans, the landscape was not an empty wilderness waiting to be explored. It was a vast network of information filled with clues that revealed where people were, where they had been, and where they needed to go. Modern maps place symbols on paper or screens to represent rivers, mountains, and landmarks. Ancient humans learned to recognize those same features directly in the real world. A river could serve as a natural highway that guided travel across great distances. A mountain range could function as a permanent reference point, visible from many miles away. Coastlines created reliable routes that were often difficult to lose. Valleys, rock formations, forests, and distinctive hills became navigation markers remembered across generations. People who spent their entire lives moving through the same regions developed an intimate understanding of the landscape. Every journey added new information to an ever-expanding mental map. A person might remember where fresh water could be found during dry seasons. They might know which valleys provided shelter during storms, and which routes became dangerous at certain times of year. This knowledge was not stored in books. It was stored in memory and shared through experience. Children learned these routes gradually, by traveling alongside older and more experienced members of the community. As they grew older, the landscape became increasingly familiar. A particular hill was not simply a hill. It might indicate the location of a nearby water source, a seasonal campsite, or a route leading toward another region. A bend in a river could serve as a landmark connected to multiple memories and pieces of information. Over time, thousands of individual details became linked together into a coherent mental representation of the environment. Modern psychologists sometimes describe this ability as cognitive mapping. Humans possess an extraordinary capacity to build mental models of the spaces they occupy. Ancient humans relied on this ability constantly, because navigation depended upon it. The landscape itself became a living map that could be read by anyone who understood its features. This approach worked remarkably well, because natural landmarks rarely disappeared. Unlike paper maps that could be lost or damaged, rivers and mountains remained visible year after year. Knowledge about these features accumulated across generations and became part of a community's collective memory. The result was a navigation system that required no paper, no ink, and no technology. But understanding the landscape was only part of the story. To travel successfully across vast territories, ancient humans also needed an extraordinary ability that modern people use far less often. They needed powerful memories. Long before maps existed, memory served as one of humanity's most important navigation tools. Ancient humans often traveled through territories so large that modern people might expect written maps to be necessary. Yet many hunter-gatherer groups successfully navigated these landscapes, using knowledge stored entirely inside the human mind. Remembering locations was not optional. It was essential for survival. People needed to know where reliable water sources could be found during different seasons. They needed to remember the locations of edible plants, hunting grounds, shelter sites, and dangerous areas. Forgetting critical information could waste valuable time, energy, and resources. In extreme situations, it could even threaten survival. As a result, memory became closely connected to everyday life. Knowledge was constantly reinforced through repeated travel and practical experience. Each journey strengthened existing mental maps while adding new details to them. A successful traveler might remember dozens of water sources spread across a large region. They might know which routes became flooded after heavy rain, and which valleys remained accessible during difficult conditions. This information accumulated gradually over years of observation and movement. Children began learning these details long before they traveled independently. By accompanying older members of the community, they absorbed knowledge about landmarks, routes, and resources. Every trip became a lesson in navigation. Over time, thousands of observations combined into a sophisticated understanding of the environment. Ancient humans also benefited from something modern people rarely experience. They paid extraordinary attention to their surroundings because survival depended on it. A distinctive rock formation, an unusual tree, or a specific bend in a river could become an important navigation marker. These features helped organize information inside memory. Rather than remembering isolated facts, people connected knowledge to places they encountered repeatedly. A water source might be associated with a nearby hill. A hunting ground might be linked to a particular valley. A seasonal campsite might be remembered through a sequence of landmarks encountered along the journey. This approach transformed the landscape into a network of memory cues. Each landmark triggered additional information connected to that location. The environment itself helped people remember what they needed to know. In many ways, ancient humans carried maps inside their minds rather than inside their hands. And some cultures developed an even more remarkable system for preserving navigation knowledge across generations. They turned directions into stories and songs. One of the most fascinating navigation systems ever developed by humans existed long before written maps became common. In several indigenous Australian cultures, knowledge about the landscape was preserved through systems often called songlines. A songline was far more than a simple song. It functioned as a map, a history lesson, and a navigation guide, woven together into a memorable narrative. The sequence of verses described landmarks, water sources, travel routes, and important locations across the landscape. A traveler who knew the song could follow its instructions and move across large distances without needing a physical map. Each section of the song corresponded to real places encountered along the journey. The order of the lyrics helped preserve the correct sequence of landmarks. In effect, the song became a portable navigation system stored inside memory. This approach demonstrates an important principle about human cognition. People often remember stories and music more easily than disconnected pieces of information. Ancient humans took advantage of this tendency by embedding practical knowledge inside memorable narratives. Directions became easier to remember because they were linked to stories, characters, and meaningful events. A traveler did not need to memorize a list of coordinates. They needed to remember a story. Many other cultures use similar techniques. Important routes, landmarks, and survival knowledge were frequently preserved through oral traditions passed from one generation to the next. Children learned these stories while growing up and gradually absorbed the information they contained. By adulthood, they possessed a detailed understanding of the landscape, even if they had never seen a written map. Oral traditions also helped protect knowledge from being lost. If information existed only inside the memory of one individual, it could disappear when that person died. Stories and songs solved this problem by distributing knowledge throughout the community. Many people remembered the same information and passed it forward together. This created a remarkably durable system, capable of preserving navigation knowledge for centuries. Researchers studying oral traditions have repeatedly found that important information can remain surprisingly accurate when communities actively maintain it. The success of these systems reveals that navigation is not just about knowing where you are. It is about remembering how locations connect to one another across a landscape. Stories, songs, and traditions helped ancient humans preserve those connections long before paper maps existed. Yet even these remarkable memory systems relied on something else. Ancient travelers constantly paid attention to clues provided by the natural world itself. Nature was not merely the environment through which they traveled. It was one of their most reliable guides. Ancient humans did not navigate by memory alone. They also paid constant attention to the natural clues surrounding them every day. Modern travelers often focus on roads, signs, and digital directions. Ancient travelers focused on rivers, coastlines, stars, weather patterns, and animal behavior. These environmental signals provided valuable information about direction and location. Rivers were especially important because they naturally connected large areas of the landscape. Following a river often reduced the risk of becoming lost, while providing access to fresh water and food resources. Many early human migrations likely followed river systems for exactly this reason. Coastlines offered similar advantages. A traveler moving along a coastline always knew where one side of the environment was located. This reduced navigational uncertainty and created predictable travel routes across large distances. Mountains also served as reliable reference points. Unlike temporary landmarks, Mountain ranges remained visible for years, decades, and even generations. A distant peak could help travelers maintain orientation while moving through unfamiliar territory. The night sky provided another powerful navigation tool. Long before telescopes existed, humans carefully observed the movements of stars across the heavens. The position of celestial objects could help travelers maintain direction during long journeys. Although navigation by stars became more sophisticated in later societies, even early humans likely benefited from observing predictable patterns in the sky. Animal behavior also provided useful clues. Large herbivores often traveled between water sources, grazing areas, and seasonal habitats. Following these movements could reveal valuable information about resources hidden within the landscape. Experienced travelers understood that animals frequently knew where food and water could be found. Weather patterns offered additional guidance. Seasonal winds, rainfall cycles, and changing temperatures influenced when and where people traveled. Successful navigation required understanding not only geography, but also timing. A route that worked well during one season might become difficult or dangerous during another. Ancient humans therefore learned to read the environment as a constantly changing source of information. The natural world communicated through patterns that became visible to those who paid attention. Modern people often view nature as scenery. Ancient humans viewed it as information. Every river, star, mountain, animal trail, and seasonal change contributed to a larger picture that helped guide movement across vast distances. The remarkable result of these combined abilities is visible throughout human history. Using memory, observation, stories, landmarks, and environmental knowledge, humans gradually expanded across the entire planet. And that achievement may be one of the greatest navigation successes our species has ever accomplished. The story of ancient human travel is ultimately the story of human adaptability. Our ancestors managed to accomplish something that would seem almost impossible to many modern people. They spread from Africa across multiple continents without relying on printed maps, compasses, satellites, or digital navigation systems. The process did not happen all at once. Most migrations unfolded gradually across hundreds or thousands of years as communities explored new territories and shared knowledge with future generations. Each generation added new information to the collective understanding of the world. Routes were refined. Landmarks became familiar. Knowledge about resources accumulated. The result was an expanding network of navigation information, stored inside human memory and culture. People learned where water could be found, where food was abundant, and which routes offered the safest passage through difficult environments. These discoveries rarely belonged to a single individual. They became part of the shared knowledge of entire communities. Over time, this collective intelligence allowed humans to move into environments ranging from tropical forests to frozen northern regions. Few other species have demonstrated such flexibility across such a wide variety of landscapes. What makes this achievement especially remarkable is that ancient humans did not possess fundamentally different brains from our own. The same cognitive abilities that helped them navigate continents still exist today. The difference lies in how those abilities were used. Modern technology performs many navigational tasks that ancient humans carried out themselves. GPS systems remember routes. Digital maps store geographic information. Search engines provide answers that once had to be memorized. As a result, many people rarely exercise the navigation skills their ancestors used regularly. Yet the underlying capacity remains. Research continues to show that humans possess powerful abilities for spatial memory, pattern recognition, and environmental awareness. When circumstances require it, people can still develop impressive navigational skills. Ancient humans remind us that the human brain is capable of far more than we often assume. Their journeys were not guided by luck. They were guided by memory, observation, experience, cooperation, and an extraordinary ability to learn from the world around them. The next time you open a map application to find a destination only a few miles away, consider the journeys completed by your ancestors. They crossed deserts without road signs. They followed coastlines without charts. They navigated forests without trails. They traveled thousands of miles without ever unfolding a map. And perhaps the most surprising part of the story is that their greatest navigation technology was never something they carried in their hands. It was the human brain they carried with them everywhere they went.